Hey guys, joining the show today, we have Mr. John Wesley Shipp. You know him as Mitch Leery from Dawsons Creek. You know him as The Flash, Mr. Barry Allen, or Henry Allen, depending on which series you watched. This was a fantastic episode. It's a supersized episode for you guys. We spent over an hour and 20 minutes talking for you guys, answering questions, and digging in to so much detail on so many parts of Dawsons Creek. Guys, this is going to be an episode I guarantee you're going to like, so let's get right to it. Guys, this is the show, and it starts right now.
Welcome to the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. We have with us John Wesley Shipp. How are you, sir?
How are you, man? It's good to be here with you virtually.
I know. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Our fans, I posted just 24 hours before we sat down tonight. Had put out the picture on Facebook and that of like, hey, we got this interview coming. Hit all the Dawson groups on there, and it blew up.
Fantastic!
Over 100 people within a few hours, like hitting likes and loves, and we had a ton of questions. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, but a lot of people really just want to tell you how much they love you. A few people asked you if you could come fix their dishwasher. And wanted to say Dawson's dad is still hot, so we'll cover that and we can move on.
It's like all affirmation from all corners is gratefully received. We'll put it that way. So that's great to hear. Thank you for telling me that.
I want to start off. I know we got a lot of people listening because of Dawson's Creek, and that's been a huge one. But I want to talk about the Flash for a minute.
Yeah.
If we can, I'll be the first to say I'm not a big follower of like the DC universe, I guess. Have been more Marvel based, but saw Flash. Steve Amell was part of when he jumped in off a part of kind of the mixing there, into WWE for a little bit and into wrestling. So it kind of got me to mix up a little bit with some of it. But you've been a big part of the Flash from the original to now being back on the series. How has that been to kind of mix the two? I guess mixing the generations is the best way to put it.
It's been an amazing journey, Josh, and it's nothing that I ever anticipated at the beginning. We were in fact, I'll get to this with Dawson's Creek also. I have landed at particular moments in my career at sort of seminal moments in redefining how to tell stories for television. The first was my daytime TV during the youth revolution in the early 80s. And then the first Flash, what they call the OG Flash for Warner Brothers, CBS, which was a new way of telling these stories for adult audiences. It was such an enormous undertaking in those days because we didn't have CGI. It was all live action effects, and it took us forever. We were the most expensive show Warner Brothers had ever done in the history of television. And we were still always over our budget and over time. And I tell you, with that and the challenges of working in what was visually a really great creation, which was the suit, they promised me they wouldn't have me running around in a pair of red tights because that was my horror. I came to long for those red tights, as it got hotter and hotter and hotter. But I'll tell you, at the end of that season, I thought that was it. When they told me, I flew back to New York right after the next week, the new season was announced. And it was kind of like good news, bad news. The bad news is you're not going to do another season. The good news is you may live another year, because it was just that difficult in 1990 to get an hour of special effects, action adventure, superhero television that was film quality and that was taken seriously, But I thought once I was out of it, I was done. I thought that was it. And then as kind of a kick, they asked me to voice Professor Zoom in Batman the Brave and the Bold. And I thought, oh yeah, that would be kind of fun, play my own worst enemy. And then when the new version of The Flash came in and I had heard how Jeff Johns had kind of blown up the Allen family, how Henry was suddenly wrongfully convicted of killing his wife in front of his 10-year-old son and had been in the hell of Iron Heights prison for 14 years when the show began, and only Barry believed he was innocent. I thought, if they come to me that's the role I would want. And that's what they offered. And I wouldn't give, as my grandmother used to say, from Norfolk, Virginia, I wouldn't give something pretty for particularly that first season, but all the scenes in the first 2 seasons opposite Grant Gustin's young Barry Allen as his father, who was just trying to hold a mirror up to Barry and tell him to trust himself, as I was to Grant. And as soon as I knew that he would make an awesome Flash. What a wonderful actor and what a fine friend he has turned out to be. But yeah, and then they came around and made me Jay Garrick, which was the character everybody wanted me to play to begin with. And then they came up with the idea of putting me back in the original suit. And that's when I went, whoa, settle down, big fella. You know, it's kind of like, you want me to do what? You realize that was like, at the time, 28 years ago, you know? But God bless Kate Main and the wonderful craftspeople at Ocean Drive Leather in Vancouver. We worked and worked and worked and had fittings and shaved and molded and refit and actually, I think, got away with. One thing I wanted to be very clear about, I says, now, we're not going to pretend that those 28 years haven't happened, right? We're not going to pretend I'm me 30 years ago, right? There's, oh, no. Life has gone on. It's your Barry Allen 28 years later. I said, okay, we'll see what we can come up with. And then the writing, you know, Eric Wallace's production and, you know, Sterling Gates writing, and he was on the set supporting all through that very emotional ending of the storyline. And yeah, it's been a remarkable thread. And I'll tell you, and then we can get off of Flash, but clearly it's been a big part of my career. Yes, I've been a working actor for over 40 years. And Flash has woven through that, Broadway, off-Broadway, other television shows, series, independent film. But it has been what has allowed me to go to conventions, for example, and meet families and have very emotional interactions with people who will say, you know, I watched your show with my father or grandfather, and now I'm watching the new show with my kids, and you're the thread that runs through that tapestry. You know, they get very emotional. It's quite moving. So, you know, if part of my journey was to turn out to be a Flash ambassador of sorts, you know, I'm perfectly okay with that.
I think it's really cool to see like how much they've kind of been able to mix it back and be able to pull back so much of the generation and mix it together and make it, you know, still fit with everything. That I think that's a really cool concept that they've been able to pull off that not a lot of shows are able to do.
Not a lot of shows trust themselves enough to do that, you know, because I think it takes a very secure group of writers and producers to say, yeah, when we were growing up, we loved that show and we're going to write a great show. We know we're going to write a great show. And for the fun of it and to engage the audience from that day, which was a larger network audience when there were only 4 or 5 networks. And we're going to engage everybody. And we're going to bring it all into canon, and we're going to write this show that we want to see and that we're enthusiastic about. And we're going to invite the audience from then, from now, from tomorrow to come along, you know, this kind of wonderful, fantastic journey with us. And I think that kind of enthusiasm and inclusiveness communicates.
No, by far. All right, let's shift gears here into Dawsons. I know that's where our big fan base is sitting right now. How did it come to be that you know, for you to become Mitch on that show? How did that all start out?
You know, nothing is very, you know, it's like, sometimes I think it's like, okay, the final result is always fun, whether it's, you know, whatever it is, but the process, it's like, sometimes I go, really, God? Couldn't have made this one just a little easier. Although Henry was easy, they called and they offered me the role of Henry Allen. But, you know, for Dawson's Creek, when they shot the pilot presentation, I was off in Moab, Utah for 5 weeks shooting a little movie called The Lost Treasure of Dos Santos with David Carradine and Lee Majors and Kathy Lee Crosby and Michelle. And Green, and I wasn't available. There was a different dad for the pilot presentation. Over the summer, they decided they wanted to go in a little bit different direction with the dad. So they held auditions again. And I saw the pilot presentation, and I was immediately, as everybody was in those days, sort of transfixed by this show, the look of it, the feel of it, the sound of it, the way the kids talk, the issues they were dealing with, the way they were speaking about them, which at the same time was elevated. And I totally bought it. I totally bought it. You know, it's like someone said, a rather big star said to Kevin Williamson at a dinner party, well, kids don't talk like that. And he shot back, well, maybe not, but they'd like to, you know. But putting the words to the complex feelings that you have when you're that age, the way the creek itself was a character in the show. The fact that it was not Hollywood, it was not Fast Times at Ridgemont High, it wasn't 90210, it was its own entity. And I was charmed, to use another WB show. Wasn't that on the WB at the time? At the time. I'll just get those plugs in, you know, get those brownie points. No, but yeah. And so I went in and auditioned for Kevin Williamson and the people. I was shooting this mad Dylan Thomas, Bible quoting, motorcycle gang leading, concrete bunker thug for Soldier of Fortune at the time. And during a 4 or 5 minute knife fight that I had with Brad Johnson, he broke my nose. So my eyes were swollen. They wanted to take me to the network. And then, you know, I looked like Rocky Graziano, I was like, you know, going in, I thought, well, I don't know how this is going to work. But I went in and I read in a network test, which they all shorten your life, for the producers and the writers. And I was on a plane, I think about 3 days later, because they had already started shooting the second episode. So I had to go back and reshoot the scenes from the first episode. Don't feel bad for that actor, because he was in a movie with Al Pacino. I'm sitting there watching this movie with Al Pacino, and I said, oh, great, he gets the movie with Al Pacino. But anyway, God bless him, you know. I was on a plane, and that began this remarkable journey. It's very interesting to walk into the cast that had already bonded. Same thing I just did with Ruby Herring Mysteries. There was a different dad playing the first episode for Hallmark, and I walked in to play the wonderful Taylor Cole's father, which was such an interesting experience because I've never had an adult daughter. I've always had sons, you know, on TV. And, you know, walking into Dawsons Creek, where they had already started to form those wonderful relationships with these bright, beautiful, intelligent, emotionally available, unjaded young cast, you know, in this enclave in Wilmington, North Carolina. It was a real special environment. I mean, we were protected from maybe some of the excesses we might have had to deal with had we shot in New York or LA. It was its own sort of magic island for a number of seasons.
That's what you know, Keir Smith said that that was one of the best things about the show, was being just completely removed. There was no, you know, it was you guys, it was your own bubble. It was, you know, kind of just being real life, I guess, minus, you know, away from Hollywood or New York. And then, you know, Mary Margaret said the same. Nina said the same. You know, she grew up there, you know, lived there like right around the block, she says. So like it was just being back home for her. But, you know, that was one of the things that they also was one of the nicest parts and made it so much more connected with everybody, was just being away. Like you guys had your own spot, your own place. There was no Hollywood, which has to be huge when you know, think very young actors.
Yes.
A very young kid crew growing up on the show, and they didn't have to deal with the Hollywood drama, I guess might be the best way to put it, that, you know, or that trap that I guess, you know, falls into so many people.
Yeah, there was even a lag time, I think, a greater lag time than there would have been had we been in New York, between the time that they became internationally famous, and they realized that had happened. There was like it happened before they realized it. Mary Margaret was with, I don't know if she told you, she was with James when he signed his first autograph.
She didn't tell me that.
And he was like, oh my God, it was such a new experience for him. When Varsity Blues came out and it went to #1, he took Mary Margaret and myself to the theater to see it with him, because we were the surrogate parents on location. So it was very very sweet. I know Mary Margaret was very much the, I don't want to say the cast mother. She was sometimes the cast sister. Sometimes she was the one, raising hell, and but she would have she and Raoul, her husband, had the boat. It was, now I have to say, when you are young, as they were, and you become international stars, after a while, and all these other opportunities are presenting themselves, I think certainly by season 5, certainly by season 6, it was starting to, I don't want to say fracture, but it was starting to, people were headed all in different directions. They had their movie deals. They had this that they wanted to do. They needed to be. So it began to have a bit of an air of impatience, where at the beginning, those first 2, 3 years, it was discovery. And to go through that with them through their eyes and be a part of that kind of energy. Plus, it's just beautiful. I'm from Tidewater area in Virginia, and I'm trying to say my R's. I usually say Virginia and Tidewater, area from Norfolk, Virginia, where I was born. So eastern coastal North Carolina was really not that alien to me, and it was beautiful. And you had 2 cultures. You had the river culture, which was where the older historic ghost lamp tours, gas lamp tours would be held, and that they had a very interesting club there for a while with a swing that went out over the bar. At one point there's Katie swinging out over the bar. We're going, okay, we've got to get Katie off the swing. But and then there was the beach, the opposite side, which was the Outer Banks, which was Wrightsville Beach, Carolina Beach, and sun and fun and boats and jet skis and footballs. So yeah, it's an experience I'm really glad that I had. Also, because, as I said, it redefined the way stories were told for young people. I mean, people forget, by the time it's an inevitable arc. If something is a pop cultural phenomenon, there's going to be, here's baseline. It shoots up to here. It doesn't go back to here. It has to go to here. And, people are like, Dawson's Creek, make it, before it assumes its rightful place in the anthology of shows of the time. But we were consistently editor's pick. We were the critically acclaimed Dawson's Creek first season. The hurricane episode, 3rd episode, I think, of the first season, in which Mitch finds out that Gail is having an affair. I don't want to say cheating on him, so pejorative, but having an affair with her coworker. And Dawson, the whole thing, and the hurricane is happening, and that's one of the finest hours of television that you'll see.
Oh yeah, and that works. That bridge is perfect. That bridge is perfect because that was one of the main. Mary Margaret talked about that scene, and even when she talked about it, she paused. She's like, I have goosebumps just remembering that whole, you guys shooting that. And there was a lot of questions that came up on that episode that I really want to get into. A lot of it was the emotion on just behind that and how much went into it. Try to kind of pick through some questions here just a little bit. One of them came from a Carrie Walker. Would love to know during that fight scene with Mary Margaret in the hurricane episode, if there was a moment before or after that you felt like you needed to kind of pause and just pull yourself back and remove the character, I guess, from you a little bit, with how well that emotion came out and how real everything felt during that.
I think it's exactly the opposite. I think once we went, it's like if you're going to swim the English Channel, once you dive in, you're in, and you keep swimming for all you're worth, hoping that you're going to get to the other shore and end up with something that is meaningful, you know? And so, of course, we all got the scripts ahead of time. We talked whatever things felt right, felt uncomfortable, if we wanted to make any changes. We discussed with the director, we would have a cast read through, and then you go in to do it. And just the way the set is lit, the way the feeling that's going on, the best crews are very responsive, as they were on Flash when his mother was killed, or when I was killed. Same thing on Dawson's Creek. If a crew senses that something remarkable is happening, because, you know, when you're dealing with so many different people and so many different characters in this and a time schedule, and to get it's like trying to capture lightning in a bottle to get the truth of it. And that's another way that I've been fortunate, from daytime TV through prime time. I've worked with casts and crews who were heavily invested in getting to beyond the entertainment value, to get to some truth in the moment that will hopefully have resonance with viewers in their own lives. And so once we went under, and the light was, particularly once the lights went out and we're dealing with looking for the batteries, you know, and Mitch just goes numb. Batteries. He doesn't want to until it explodes and I crash that ridiculous aquatic theme restaurant. It's like, Mitch, Leery, what are you thinking? You know, it's like, and she's trying to get through to me. And then, of course, it was not in the script, but holding the flashlight up to her face and saying, "Don't you cry. You don't get to cry." The words were in the script, but I found that, you know, I'm avoiding. Bam, she's got so much raw honesty coming at me that to stop her, I wheeled around on her and I put the flashlight right in her face. "You don't get to cry, you know, not this time." And when you're working with actors for whom, and you're all on the same wavelength, that's why we do it, man, because the business sucks, you know? But the work itself, at the level at which I've been able to perform it, and I'm not claiming to be the best actor in the world or even be on any list, but I tell people, whether it's daytime TV, whether it's superhero adventure television, whether it's an independent film, whether it's the Tony Award-winning play on Broadway, which I have done, the work can be done anywhere. And when it happens, and it happens in conjunction with other actors who are also doing the work, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. So no, we didn't. The thing was, I remember I was just reading, there's an old movie called Sorry, Wrong Number with Barbara Stanwyck, who was, you know, an every woman actor, you know, cast and crews, everybody loved working with her. And Sorry, Wrong Number, these series of scenes where she overhears a plot of a murder happening due to a misconnection on a phone, and she's an invalid. And it happens, and it becomes more and more desperate, all the way through to she sees the shadow coming up the stairs of the guy, and her husband's on the phone saying, "You've got to get out of the bed and go to the window and scream, or you only have 3 minutes to live." And the director asked her, they said, "Now this is quite a lot. This is a load. Do you want to break it up and do it in segments? Because once you're in a set, you're in a set." Or she said, "No, I would rather shoot chronologically the whole thing, so that by the time she's completely unraveled and unwound at the end of that, she's been shooting those scenes for God knows how long, because they didn't get all those scenes in one day. And it shows. It shows. And it's one reason why she was nominated for an Oscar for that performance. You know, sorry, wrong number. But anyway, so no, I've always found it that it's hard sometimes to get in and out of it when it's like that. And it takes a lot of work. And once you're in it, if you make it in, you know, if you crack the ice and go beneath the surface, you don't want anything to disturb that until you're ready to come up and take another breath. I hope that answers it in some kind of way. Yeah.
Oh no, I think that was an amazing answer on that. How that probably is one of the top, I'd say, 5 episodes. I mean, probably one of the number one that people remember. You know, that scene, everything coming to a head, just, you know, everything exploding there. How is it to kind of look back? I don't know if you rewatched any of that, but like, how is it to kind of look back at that now and see just kind of that whole storyline and how it came to be and just that final combustion of it?
I watched it and I used some of those scenes, and certainly when I came back for The Long Goodbye and my final 2 episodes, you know, I've watched, and I had the Hurricane Car episode on my resume reel. So with I've watched it so much with the original music, which, excuse me, was so important to the show. I mean, our producers spent so much time picking the right song for the moment. You know, the montages set to the music. It was like the Creek. I'm saying I have a low battery. I don't know what to do about that exactly. I may have to go to a different computer. I don't know what's happening there. But as I was saying, like the Creek itself, the music was a character in the show. So I don't know what my reaction would be to going back and hearing it with new music, because they had to they couldn't license all that music, you know, when they put it on DVD. But I'll have to do that sometime.
It's definitely it still has that same, just from your guys' acting on it, just the emotion that you and Mary Margaret put into that is so real, is the best way I can describe it. I think that it still hits that same button. It still hits those same emotions, just to kind of put the goosebumps and that, you know, shiver in your spine a little bit of like, wow, this was huge.
I have to tell you, one of her gifts as an actor. She knows it. It's too cynical to call it a tool in her toolbox, because, you know, there are some actors that make water on their face and you think, well, yeah, wow, that's a really neat trick, you know, but I'm not really moved by what I'm seeing. I don't really feel like you're emotionally involved. I think you just know how to make water on your face. And then there are actors like Mary Margaret, and you see her go through that scene, the scene at Mitch's funeral, the scene at the sink afterwards, when she's standing in the driveway after I peel out at the beginning of the hurricane and leave her standing there sobbing. And you watch that and you go, oh my God, that cost something. That cost her emotionally, Mary Margaret, to get to that place. And she's one of the actors who can do that, you know, so effectively and meaningfully. And I think that's why Dawson's mom, I mean, that would be a character that if she hadn't been so good at playing the vulnerability and the hurt, that character could have easily been disliked, because it was set up in the script. Here's lovable, if not entirely motivated Mitch, playing around with his little figures and his, you know, it's like, get a job, grow up, you know, who loves his son. They have the way that relationship was written was just beautiful. And I could go into specifics. I won't right now unless you ask me. And here's the Scarlet Woman.
Right.
who betrays him and doesn't have a good reason for doing it other than she wanted to want again. You know, it was Mary Margaret who sold that, because that character could have been that in terms of the hearts and minds of the character. But there's so much vulnerability there, and there's so much pain that she redeemed that character.
Oh, she definitely, like, she made you feel for the character during that part, and it's truly, like, just the way you put that, not even really realizing it, I think, at the time, but looking back, like, that is truly just amazing how she was able to take that character from that view and be able to pull it into where everyone felt for her, and started pulling for her in that same push. So that's huge. Let's talk about you, um, and just the character with Dawson. How, truly, like, I was growing up with the show, and there were so many times, and that, like, it was funny because I rewatched it, and there was times watching the show initially that I'm like, why are you forcing him on this? Like, yeah, of course he wants to go hang out with his friends. Come on, like, Dawson's not wrong. And now I rewatch it, and I'm like, just hang out with your dad. Like, what's wrong with this?
You turn into your father slowly.
It does, and but it's
so
so great to be able to look back at that and realize how well it was written, how well you guys did that, to be able to pull emotions from both sides of it. How was it? Because I know just hearing from Mary Margaret talk about her and James, you guys going to the Dancing with the Stars shows, to be there supporting. You guys were truly a family. It really seems like. How was that? Just that relationship built there, and dig into that if you would.
Well, from my standpoint, you get to know a lot of who people are through their work. And as I said, I did an interview for Australian TV not long ago, and they had a chyron across the bottom that said America's favorite TV dad. So, I've had some kids, I've been lucky because you get to know who those kids are. Playing Grant Gustin's father is a very different experience from playing James Vanderbeek's. And James was playing Dawson, and who James was fed into who Dawson was, and vice versa. More cerebral, smarter than Mitch, certainly. Whereas Henry Allen was a heart surgeon, brilliant, and Dawson and Barry Allen, Grant Gustin, was very vulnerable and very emotional. I say was because he's grown into the part so magnificently over 6 seasons. But such an amazing amount of vulnerability, emotional vulnerability there. If anything, Mitch was the crack up. He was the one saying, okay, talking about watching his wife on TV and her newscast was the best foreplay, to his son. And he's going out on a date, and I say, have fun, play safe. He's like, oh, or he's walking in and we're doing it on the coffee table. Mom and dad are doing it on the coffee table. And, but you get in and you get to know who the people are. And then you get to see how, if hopefully they're bringing who they are to the words that they're saying. And then at some point, if it's ideal, you lose track of who's talking. Is it Mitch talking to Dawson, or is it John talking to James? Is it Henry talking to Barry, or is it the OG Flash talking to this wonderful new actor who is taking the mantle? And when you slip in and out of that, it's like a magic mirror. That's a wonderful thing. I'll tell you the scene where, and this is the genius of Kevin Williamson, where Joey is in love with Dawson. Dawson is in love with Jen. Dawson's making a horror film. He's going to have a decapitation of Joey. So he has a prosthetic head of Joey. He's asking his dad about kissing a girl. And so Mitch has him practice on a prosthetic head of Joey. And I go through all the first time when I kissed his mother for the first time, and chapstick and all that, and keeping your lower lip You got to keep that loose. And wildly, weirdly funny. Meanwhile, we didn't know Joey, who was in love with Dawson, has snuck into the upstairs and is watching us. And so this is the construct. We have Dawson practicing to kiss Jen on a prosthetic head of Joey, who is in love with him and who is watching from the upstairs railing. I mean, I just thought that was such a brilliant construct. And as he's practicing to kiss Jen on a prosthetic head of her, she closes her eyes and imagines it's happening between the two of them. I thought that was, if I had to point to one scene about an idea of the quirky genius that was Kevin Williamson at his best during the whole Dawson's Creek experience, I'd have to say that would be right up there, because it elicited everybody in that scene was having a different experience, right? Mitch was having the first time he kissed Gail. Dawson was worried and anxious about, and even trusting his dad. Imagine trusting your father to that extent, to have that kind of what a wonderful relationship. I loved playing that closeness. And then you've got Joey up there with her longing, knowing that he's practicing on a prosthetic head of her to kiss a different girl. So that was just one example among many of the unique experiences that playing that role brought.
Let's branch into what some people have asked, and has to be kind of, I think, a huge part of the series, and really where they went with it. Why did you have to get ice cream?
Why did I have to get ice cream? Well, that was kind of an inside joke, because John loves ice cream. It's my weakness. It's my downfall. I love chocolate and vanilla ice cream together. Any combination. It can be Swiss almond vanilla. It could be chocolate chip, but you can't put any peanut butter in my chocolate. You know what I mean? I love chocolate and vanilla ice cream. And I'll be, John, there's ice cream on the set. You know what I mean? So when I heard it was going to be death by ice cream, I laughed. I laughed right out loud. And I thought, it's like when I was playing the drug addicted cop in NYPD Blue. And I walk into a scene, this is after Flash 1990, and I say, I came back from Vegas, I lost my Flash money. I'm like, wait a minute, who wrote this? It was very funny that's what they used.
How do you feel? And obviously, I remember watching. I think it was like the talk on E or something like that. I can't remember what the thing was. It was like a big web series, and they had talked a lot about like coming into that season, like some of the spoilers of like not getting into it, but saying like, hey, John Wesley has signed on for like 4 episodes, and that was it. And it put this whole spin of like, what's going to happen? Are they just Dawson going to be more on his own? What's going on with it? And then when that came to be, Mitch dies. When you look back at it, I guess, or even at that time, was it the right time? I mean, if you have to look back, if you had that Monday morning.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. See, one of the things that I was promised when I signed on to Dawson's Creek initially, and these were Kevin Williamson's exact words, I wanted to know, going into playing, I had played a father on Neverending Story too, but that was a movie, and I was taking the journey with the kid. So I was with the late Jonathan Brandis. So, and I was wondering what we would have to do, because I knew, well, if we're going to be in North Carolina and we're going to be away, we're not going to be auditioning for other things. That's going to be limiting in terms of except during the off season. And his comment was, I promise I won't turn you into 90210 parents. They said, you'll have independent storylines subsidiary to the kids, which will be the A story, but they will be independent B storylines, which will intersect with and inform the experience and the lives the experiences that the kids are having, as they grow into young adults. And I said, great, that sounds wonderful. And that's how it was for a couple of years. By around season 4, I began to lose the thread of the narrative. I was suddenly the least motivated man in Capeside becomes a football coach. And okay, that's a challenge for Mitch. It was certainly fun to play. But I began to feel, coming to the end of season 4, that the parents' importance in the show, and it kind of mirrors life, the parents' importance in their kids' life begins to diminish, the role that they play as the children become older, as they graduate and go to college. And I figured with the kids leaving the creek, that our storylines were going to be de-emphasized even more. And when they let all of the adults' contracts lapse without re-signing us to our 19 episodes, 19 out of 22, at the end of season 4, and then they came back and they were only asking for 6 episodes, I went, okay, this has been a wonderful and rich experience in which I have been allowed to contribute, in a way that I felt was really meaningful. Do I want to go back and run the risk of feeling sort of useless, and so I was like, you know what? I had a long talk with my manager. It had been 4 really good seasons. I said, for me to go back and do that for just 6 episodes, and I'm going to sign a contract, which means throughout that season, they have first refusal on those 9 months, and it's only 6 episodes. I said, let's set our price really high, figuring that they probably wouldn't meet it. And if they didn't, I was good with it. I had had 4 wonderful seasons. I had played on a show that changed the way these shows were told for kids. And I went back to LA for the off season thinking, well, I'm totally prepared emotionally and creatively to let that body of those 4 years speak for themselves. And they began to shoot the first episode. And I figured, well, that's it. I'm done. Okay, what's happening? What are the other projects in LA? And I'm getting on with my life. During the second episode, the network shut down production because they had no storyline. That was the reasoning. And they began to scramble, and they were coming up with different ideas. What could be a big... From my end, I was in LA, and I get this call from executive producer Paul Stupid. I'm going to be in LA. Can we have coffee? And I thought, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that at that point, he's the one that told me that they shut down production. And so we have coffee, and he said, we've run into an obstacle. He said, I know that you have not been increasingly unhappy, but you have sort of remarked on the parents' diminishing importance over the course of the 4th season. If we, A, give you the money you're asking for, and B, promise you 2 really good scripts and a really respectful, meaningful send-off, will you come back and kill the character? And I was like, because he had me until that moment, right? I was like, dude, come on, put your chin up just a little higher, wham, and because, you fall in love with these characters that you're playing. And so I was like, oh, okay, how long do I have to think about this? And I began to think about it. I talked with my manager and the late, great Hank McCann. And, it was like, okay, you've done this now for 4 seasons. The kids are leaving the show. They only want 6 episodes from the parents. So that means they're going to be diminishing parental duties. He said this would give us a storyline. He said, first of all, nobody will see it coming. He said, because you've been such an integral part of the show and are a much loved character on the show. No one will see it coming. It'll shake up the entire Dawson's Creek world. It'll send Gale, into rupture. We'll make it Dawson's fault, quote unquote, because he drank all the milk. And I'm the reason he went out to get more milk for the baby. Send him into therapy, send us shockwaves through Cape Side. And it will give us a story, going forward through the 5th season. And I said, well, that all sounds great. I said, I have to tell you, it really all sounds great. Not knowing eventually, you never want to get your hopes up, when they say, and we promise you 2 really great scripts. And then I read the scripts and I was like, oh, wow. And every day on those 2 episodes of the 5th season that I was shooting Mitch's farewell and then the return I felt like it was a confirmation of the decision that we had made. Because I thought I don't really remember many instances of a character being given a more respectful, affectionate send-off, the ability to tie up the relationships and just the long goodbye. What a great, it was, because that's what it was. And at the end of that, after I saw that shot where we're all taking the family photo and everybody goes and she says, boys and their toys, and she goes inside, and I'm just left standing there looking at the creek. And of course, all those wonderful memories flood back for John of the previous 4 years. And the camera pans around, and then I walk into the house and the camera goes up to the sky. And I thought, made the right decision, it was exactly the right call.
That truly is one of those episodes, just how the way you described it, like that almost could have been like, almost like the ending to like the season, the way it kind of wrapped and the way just that pan and that whole shot was so well done. I loved that whole time frame of just that whole long goodbye of seeing the flashbacks and, you with Joey of putting up the ladder so she doesn't fall, you teaching to drive, just all of these things. And you even kind of parting that dad knowledge of like, give your dad a break, he takes on a lot. Almost to the point where it was like, man, I wish that they could have spent more time in the first 4 seasons with that, like even digging in deeper there.
Yeah, I always enjoyed when I got to work with Josh. There was that wonderful Thanksgiving episode when he's chopping wood, and I'm coming out and we're having that conversation about the dad. Yeah. It was really interesting because he had a real lack of a parental relationship, a father and that father-son relationship is so important, as we know, and so loaded. But go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're good. I mean, that just so much there, like almost kind of there's a part of me is like the fan that's like, oh, I wish there was so much more dug into that, because it was so good in that one episode just to be able to see those little flashbacks and those times where it was like, oh man, this could have been all on its own almost. When you look back, I guess, at that time and realizing how much that kind of shaped that season and really drove it, is it something that when you look back at kind of how that all came together, how that kind of all, I guess, maybe fell apart and then came together for like the show itself, do you feel like that kind of was a big push point to be able to help, Mary Margaret's character kind of continue for those 2 years, but also just the show to kind of get another 2 more seasons of kind of life and kind of continue pushing? Because to me, I feel like it was a huge driving point in the final 2 seasons to really have life there.
Well, I think it was a brilliant device on the part of the writers. And because, after you've been on the air for several seasons and you've burned through a lot of story, it's like you have to keep up. And part of your appeal is that it's fresh and it's new. How do you keep it? And so you And it was so unexpected that it wasn't even planned the season before. So nobody knew. I mean, it was a case of, it's not like we planned this from the beginning, but we're not going to let anybody. No, it was, I mean, I don't know when they came up with it at the practically last minute. And then they wrote those 2 phenomenal scripts. Certainly, if it was a driving factor in what you say, in propelling the show to a successful another 1 and most of 2 seasons, then that in addition to feeling like personally I was well served as an actor and who was playing a character that I'd grown very fond of, I felt I was very well served. But I if it also served the show, and I believe it did, because it gave them something to play, and the audience reaction was so big that then they got to funnel through the emotions of their characters everything that the audience was experiencing. And so I think it was a really cool way to shake up Cape Side at the beginning of a whole different path. Kids going to college, the creek is left behind. You know, what a wonderful way to delineate. It's sort of like, you know, they do BC and AD, you know, before and after Christ. You know, it's like before and after Mitch. You know, it's like before and after the creek. You know, now we're going to leave the creek behind. That part of our life and our innocence and our attachment to all things familiar. And now we have to look ahead. We have to go forward. So I think it was a really good device. I couldn't watch the show again, you know, because that's just the way it is, right. You know, because you do get invested in these the character and in these relationships, and it would have been too. It would have been too painful to watch the show after my last episode, and I didn't. I said goodbye, and people said, "Well, are you still watching?" I said, "No, I've said my goodbyes," you know, and I understand that maybe that's what I should go back and watch, because I understand the way they tied it up and Jen's death and everything. It was just so. I would love to see how James played the psychotherapy moments, his coming to terms with his father's death and all that. Maybe I'll do that one day.
It was definitely, I don't know, it was powerful. And definitely Kevin coming back in for the finale and being able to write the whole almost movie kind of style of just the ending there was huge. And it really brought back so much just of the original kind of feel. That maybe, you know, kind of got lost there, maybe those last 2 seasons a little bit as stuff moved away and they weren't, you know, the same home base with the creek and that. Which brings me to my next question. Being the dad, Team Pacey, Team Dawson.
Oh, I would never go. It's like when people ask me, well, so who's faster, your Flash or Grant's Flash? And my answer is always the same. I would never bet against my own son. So of course I'm Team Dawson. He's my son. Broke his heart.
Mary Margaret she had asked me that question before we started, or like before we even kicked off the show. So I'm gonna work all these together with with a bunch of you guys and kind of make its own episode of just where everyone felt. But she had to go at the end of it. As much as she loves her son, she was Team Pacey.
Well, I think that's because that's where the writers channeled.
Right.
They channeled the actors' instincts, the actors' chemistry. And so I'm not surprised. Probably if I had been watching and if they did it well, and I understand they did, then I would have gone, yeah, you know, I can certainly understand.
Yeah.
I can certainly understand that. But as a father, come on.
You know, it was funny because, you know, I had told her, when it first aired, I was like, like the night after, one of my friends was like, so what'd you think? Like, you know, are you happy with the ending? And I was like, no, this is crap. Like, she's supposed to be with Dawson, not with Pacey. And I was pissed. And then like it came out on DVD and I watched it and saw a bunch of the behind the scenes stuff and everything. And then it was like really like, I think listening to like Kevin Williamson talk about why he ended it the way he did and why he wanted it that way. I was like, you know what? I actually really like this. Like Dawson has his story, which actually tied into like you wanting him to be in Hollywood, you wanting him to live that dream. And him at the end of it, he gets that call and he's like, I'm meeting with Spielberg tomorrow. And all of it comes full circle for all of them. It was perfect.
Think of that climactic moment in the bedroom where I handed the plane ticket. One of his lines is, I have to follow my own path. And he said, following my path. I said, no, you're not. You're following Joey down hers.
Right.
You know, and so, yeah, from that standpoint, it does make sense. It hurts, but come on, growing up, it's not for sissies, you know, it's like growing up. Yeah.
All right. So I want to dive into some fan questions here if we have a few moments.
Of course.
All right, let's see here. Let me find this one I wanted to start with. Here we go. All right, this one was on, came from Instagram, Pinks, LALA06. Would love to know if you were allowed to improvise on any scenes at all, and if so, what is your favorite moment?
Yes, and that is, you know, I talked earlier about how really secure writers and producers are not afraid to go back to an earlier version of a show that they're writing and integrate elements of that because they're not afraid of the comparison. Well, as it's been my experience over my 40 some years as an actor, that as soon as writers and producers realize that you're serving the character and not your own ego, they become responsive to your input. And if your first input they go with and it ends up being successful, then they trust you more. That really came into play when I am the big scene. I think it had something to do with the moon was in the title. But anyway, it was me explaining to Dawson. Mitch gets very emotional about how it ends with, my father taught me how to do this. He taught me how to shave. He taught me, but he never taught me what to do if my wife cheated on me. I never knew to ask. That whole long monologue went through several editions. The stuff was always there. It actually was longer. I had a director tell me, John, you're the only actor I know who cuts his own lines. And I'm like, well, I'd rather say something once and have it land at the right moment than hint at it 3 or 4 times and diffuse the impact. So, you know, we went back and forth and I was like, God, I really feel like, and you know what the training for that was? Daytime TV. Because they were writing so fast and you could go, and I also workshopped to play with the great actor, Judith Ivey. It was a quasi rhythm and blues, country and western, psychosexual musical that we did at the Westbeth Theater in New York called Philco Blues. And it was being written and workshopped. So she was workshopping, she had all these long songs and monologues, the emotional logic, she called it, of the character, and taking pieces from here and putting them up there and say, this is what he really wants to say. If we move that here, if we shuffle, so it's like shuffling a deck of emotions to find, and I love that term, the emotional logic, which sometimes, quite often, is intellectually illogical, but there's always an underlying emotional logic. Yeah, I feel how this character got from there to there. And we kicked it around and we finally came up, I don't think that Kevin Williams said, oh, screw it, let him say whatever he wants. No, but we were able to work together. Same thing happened in OG Flash. I had this long monologue with Tina, and I remember going to Danny Bilson, who I had such a wonderful working relationship with, executive producer, co-creator with Paul DeMeo. And I said, I'm not sure this is exactly what Barry wants to say right at this moment. And he looked interested. instead of being defensive. And he said, well, what do you think he needs to say? I said, well, I'm not sure, Danny. I said, but I sort of feel coming out of this, and this, it's along the lines of blah, 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 blah. And he said, well, then say that. I'm like, oh my God, I hope I can remember it. What did I just say? But no, at best, any creative effort is collaborative. And whether it's, again, the only place where that does not happen is the theater. And in the theater, you say the words as written. Even you take a wonderful play like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which I've done in regional theater, and there are all these uhs and and hesitations and but and repetitions. You know, you think, hopefully, if the actor is good enough, that that's all spontaneous and they're coming up with that in a moment. No, it's all written there. That's the playwright has written exactly. You know, you don't improv Tennessee Williams or you know, any of these great plays. Of course, Virginia Woolf is Edward Albee. I don't mean to imply that Tennessee Williams wrote Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I'm just saying, great Shakespeare. You don't improvise. You say an you find a spontaneous way to deliver the line exactly as it's written, with all the pauses that are written there and hesitations. But in television, where you're working so fast, you know, when you can go and say, I can't, it's not connecting. And the smart ones, and I've worked with young actors on occasion, if you're smart, you realize my way may be better ultimately, but this is the horse I'm running with. And if this horse can't run that way, and if he's not clear, it's going to be muddy. So let me try to get what I need through this instrument, because I can't take this instrument, you know, this, you know, cello, and ask it to play like a trombone. You know, I've got to play this melody on the cello because that's what I'm given. That's why they say a lot of directorial choices are made in casting, because once you've cast the animal, you know, a lot of the choices roll out from that. I don't know if that answered your question or what I'm even talking about anymore at this point.
I think it was great. I told Mary Margaret the same, like, she was like, hey, I realized we went long. And I'm like, no, you could talk all day long. I'd be glad just to listen. Because like, there's so much with you and her both. You guys have so much just emotion and passion and knowledge just built into every, you know, just in all of it. It's don't stop on my account. All right, the next question I have here, I'm gonna get to one here in a minute, but Mr. Craig Edwards asked if he remembers. Oh my God,
Craig! Hi, Craig.
And we got him agreed to come on a show. We're gonna have to make sure we limit stories to stuff that nobody will get mad about. He had asked if you remember when he asked you to do a charity autograph event at a comic book store in Wilmington. I think it was like the first time you had done something maybe like that. You didn't think, or he says from how he remembers it, you didn't think anyone would show up to meet him or to meet you, and it wound up being that the line went out the door and around the building, and almost everyone had a flash item for you to sign.
I know, it was. I do remember, and I'll tell you, to this day, when I do a convention appearance, whether it's here or it's in South America or it's in Europe, there is always that moment. What if nobody showed? You know, it's like, what if they gave a party and nobody came? You know what I mean? Yep. It's like there's always that kind of but yeah, I remember that, and certainly how grateful I am to the audience that is stuck with me through daytime, through prime time, through I was on Broadway, then I was the first Flash. I went back to Broadway. played a drug addicted cop on NYPD Blue. I played a crazy person on All My Children, came back for a little stint. I was a good dad, came back and was psycho dad on Teen Wolf. I came back in Barry Allen's Wonderful Father. You know, just people who have followed and invested to the extent that they have. It's incredibly moving for me. I got to tell you, many a time at these personal appearances, you know, I'm just, you know, I have somebody in my arms, and we're both, you know, our eyes and our hearts are full because we've taken this amazing journey. And to learn, if the actor can keep the ego it checked, and by checked, I don't mean you don't have an ego, but you keep it in the right place, which is you keep reminding, because it was quite startling for me the first time that someone came up to me, said 2 words, and burst into tears. It was alarming. And then I had to put it psychologically in its right place, which is, what is this person telling me about themselves? You need to lean into this because you're being trusted with something, with a vulnerability here. Because for whatever reason, at the time that you were playing a particular part, it hooked into an experience that this person was having. And it's so meaningful that they're taking the risk to come and share this with you in person. You need to show up for this moment because this isn't about me. This is about him or her, you know? And I need to, and I think, not to get too woo-woo or too heavy here, but I think really being the son of a minister in real life, you know, who is constantly dealing with people's, just their deepest issues of faith and unfaith, belief and disbelief, and their fears, their losses, their, you know, that I saw it patterned for me, how to show up. In fact, my sister, who's now an ordained minister and is minister of music at Oakhurst Baptist Church in Decatur, Georgia. I was just on a Zoom service with them last Sunday. She wrote me once, and we were talking about the convention experience, and a friend was sharing how emotional people do get with me, and that it's amazing. And Karen was very thoughtful, my sister, for a minute, Karen Bryant Shipp, and she said, well, that's your ministry. And I thought, what a beautiful frame for it, because as soon as you put it in that frame, then you're showing up for a whole different reason, you know, and it makes you present in a very real and wonderful way.
I don't even know how to touch on that. Being able to go to like some of the conventions last year before, obviously this year, everything kind of got derailed, and getting to finally get to do some of like the interviews and stuff. One of the coolest things is, you know, seeing just the difference in celebrities, I guess is the best way to put it, where that ego is in check. Because there were some I remember sitting down with, and they, you know, or even just doing the podcast like this, and, you know, guys that will talk, and, you know, and then some that's like, sorry, you know, like I had one, it was a wrestler, and we won't get into names, but like, said like, hey, we'd love to have you on the show and everything else. Like, yeah, that'd be great. And this whole back and forth, he's like, great, it'd be $300 for 20 minutes. And I was like, thank you, come again. I'm not sorry. That's exactly yeah, I was like, that's not what we were looking at, but okay. Yeah. But it's just, you know, to be able to see how much you interact with social media and everything, the fact that you know, that ego isn't something that gets in the way, was amazing. You know, it truly is amazing to see, and it's one of the things I love doing, being able to do this and being able to just to talk with different stars from so many shows and from Hollywood in general, just that are able to be real people, I guess, as weird as that might sound.
Yeah, right. You know, the most offensive ad that was ever written, when they put up on the screen, not actors, real people. And I'm like, excuse me? It's like actors are people too. You know, I've often, when I first started doing conventions in 2006, there was a very different temperature about it. A lot of actors, I don't think, unless you had been raised in the theater, I started my career in New York, aren't comfortable with the one-on-one. They aren't comfortable with the interaction. And I've seen some people that I know are good people come off abrupt. It's simply, I think it's discomfort. And if anything, it's insecurity, you know? So if someone ever is that way with me, I try to look at it that way. Sure, there are some people in the world that just are not very nice people, but I think most people are, but it has changed. And God, if I had in some tiny way something to do with that, coming out from behind my table, engaging with people, being hands-on, that's what's so distressing about this pandemic. People are saying, well, I'm booked to go to London next month. Well, that's not going to happen. Well, what's going to happen? You're going to put us in a plexiglass bubble and people are going to come stand beside us to have their picture taken. The thing about conventions, and I'm very tactile, if I can't embrace you, if I feel like you or I need embracing, if I can't hands-on, that's where the meaningful experience is. So I don't have any idea that's going to happen. In fact, they probably already postponed it to 2021. But yeah, I've had 8 personal appearances, one in London and the rest this year were in the United States, although Peru earlier in the year we did do. And I've been in Ecuador, Chile was the beginning of this year, which is, God, was that this year? It seems like it was 5 years ago. But people all over, you know, particularly in a day when we're fractured and divided politically, and there are so many reasons to argue with each other. You walk into the wonderful, wacky world of Comic-Con, and everybody's there. You check your politics at the door. Under best case scenario, you checked your ego at the door, and you have a clear path to the emotional life of other people as they have grown up with these characters all their lives. And they have so much to share about it. And they're so interested in what you have to share about your experience. And you have these wonderful interactions with people you might not get along with at all if you met them on the street. Well, that's valuable in our society, having that.
All right, I want to move into another question. This one came from Michael Kitchens. He says, outside of Dawson's Creek, and I'm assuming The Flash. So if it is The Flash, what would be second, I guess, on that? What is your favorite project that you've worked on?
You know, it's so hard. I can't, it's like someone once said, this is not original with me, but someone once said, that's like trying to choose a favorite child. You know, I
heard that a lot.
I certainly, some of my daytime experiences, you know, I mean, I look at my dressing room mate on Guiding Light was Kevin Bacon. My leading lady on As the World Turns was Julianne Moore. And in our storyline was, you know, we just had Steven Weber. We had Julia Pagano. We had these wonderful, wonderful actors, and working under that kind of pressure. The role that I did of the woman abuser on All My Children in the 90s, you know, served as a thesis for a doctoral thesis at a major university about violent characters and their attraction and repelling at the same time for a female audience. And what does that mean sociologically? My Broadway experience, certainly saying the words of Brian Friel on a Broadway stage, those boards had been trod by so many famous legendary actors, and getting to perform that beautiful material, dancing at Lunasa 8 times a week. You know, I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. Flash 90, original Flash, was the hardest thing physically I've ever done. I certainly couldn't do that again. And it was the first time being the center of a primetime project that had a third of the backlot at Warner Brothers, having a parking space on the backlot at Warner Brothers, looking up at that water tower, knowing I have a parking, you know, and it was backbreaking, but it was exciting, and we were doing something new. Wouldn't want to trade that. Spinning off into my drug addicted cop on NYPD Blue and getting to use the whole different vibe and accent. I was doing a play in New York that also took place in Brooklyn in 1936, so they fed each other that energy to get that character. I wouldn't want to miss that. Dawson's Creek was a wonderful, sweet experience. You know, certainly coming back to the Flash is something I never expected. I just don't know that I could choose. I don't know that I could say of all the things I've ever done. But I have to say, dramatically and storyline wise, and my brother said this, they cut together all my scenes from As the World Turns, where I started as a really good guy and I went all the way out to a psychopath. And I won my first Emmy for that role. And my brother my mom actually cut together all the scenes that touched on that storyline over 8 months and made it into this extended miniseries. And my brother said, you need to watch that sometimes. He said, that's some of the best work you've ever done and one of the best stories you've ever been a part of telling. So that's a favorite. I mean, I just wouldn't even know how to pick. I wouldn't know where to start, you know. A much more interesting question for me is asking different people, I get the biggest kick because when I'm at conventions, if someone's coming up to my table like this, I know it's Teen Wolf. You're Mr. Leahy. Why did you treat Isaac so bad? And if someone's coming up like this, particularly after Dawson died, I know it's Dawson's Creek. And if someone comes up like real jazzed and excited and is holding anything red, I know it's the Flash, you know. So it's very, very, very interesting. But I always do love it when I run into someone who says, I saw you on Broadway. I saw you in Dancing at Lewis. I saw you, you know, or they remember me from Guiding Light, which was, man, that was 1980 to 84. It's like, you know, it blows my mind. I can't pick.
No, I think with just the emotion, how much everything connects to some part of your life and different things, I don't think anyone could really ask you to, like completely.
Well, they can ask. I just,
they can
I'm
ask.
stumping for an answer.
Mike Lindsay asked, what was your workout and diet routine during the run of Dawsons?
Yeah, the funny thing is I got in better shape post Flash 1990 than I was during, although I worked out a lot then too. I multiple scenes with my shirt off. It changed and it's varied over the decades. So it's hard for me to remember specifically. Usually up until about the age of 50, my diet was eat whatever I want, whenever I want, as much as I want. And I would work out 5 or 6 days a week. And I'd, of course, split my routines up into, like the routine I'm doing now is Monday was chest and tris. Wednesday was back and bis. Tomorrow will be shoulders and legs. And Saturday will be 4 sets of each body group. I call it the once over, you know, the tune up. And then I jog with the dog at night. I don't specifically remember. Someone will send me a picture from Dawson's Creek and I'll go, whoa, I was kind of jacked during that. I was, you know, you were pretty big then. But it's, you know, it's been an important part since Guiding Light, actually, because in 1980, when they were trying to, Bobby Anton, the costume designer, was talking to the head writer, and this got back to me, and they were saying, well, this character needs to look this way, that character needs to look this way. They got to me and they said, well, of course, with John Wesley, it's not a matter of how to dress him as much as it is how to undress him. So it's been, and then I always felt like I had to uphold that. Certainly with Roy Larson, I showed all of me almost. It's the body thing has led to me, has had real fitness benefits during the life. But I have found out in the last 10, 15 years that I just can't, you know, you just you can't have that pint of Haagen-Dazs and bag of M&Ms every night before you go to bed anymore. You know, it just doesn't burn off. So
I learned that the hard way, a couple of years ago, where I could eat anything, ate whatever, worked out kind of on my routine and like was fine, had shoulder surgery and was sat at home for 6 weeks and quickly like suddenly gained like 30 pounds, and then getting that back and trying to get back is never an easy thing.
It's not fun, particularly when you get to be my age. It's like I'm trying to take off my quarantine weight. You know, it's like, okay, it's not falling. It's now beginning to fall off, but I'm counting those calories, man, and working out. I gotta do something, because God forbid they ask me to go into another superhero suit. I'm like, you do realize how old I am, right?
So I have a little birdie told me that you had an album come out years ago.
Mary Margaret.
Does this picture look me?
Images. Yes.
She mentioned a story here about how you guys always like to play jokes with each other.
Oh my God.
And asked if you might remember the time you guys were slow dancing for one of your scenes to some random song that they queued up just to kind of mark it. And then when it was time to do your close up, they blared You Needed Me from your album.
I cried a tear. Yes. And so I'm into the moment, and we're going into it, and suddenly I hear my voice, and I was like, you did not do that. You did not. Well, the executive producer used to love the scenes in which she and I would slow dance. I'm like, too bad this isn't a musical. They love it when we dance. But I remember we did a flashback of a wedding, and they actually put a false bit of hair to make my hair longer in the back. Well, while we were dancing, when I would go down, it would pop out and stand like straight. And so while we're having this wonderful moment, and I just feel her put her hand back behind my head and just sort of mash it down. And I went, and then she started laughing. And so we just buried our faces in each other's necks, like in a moment of overcome with passion and emotion. We were laughing so hard.
She had mentioned one other story. She mentioned how much they loved putting you guys together dancing. But she mentioned that there was a time you guys were sitting, you had taped all day long, or, filmed all day long, and you realized she had asked you for the time, and you looked at one watch. She's like, no, your other watch. And you looked and went, oh my God, I've had both watches on all day.
Had on 2 watches the whole day. Well, sometimes you get to working so frenetically that you don't know if you're coming or going. It's like, but it was the epitome. I think there was a crew on the set. There was publicity on the set. There were a lot of actors involved. We were running back and forth to the set. It's always difficult the more actors that are involved in a scene. And at one point we had to go somewhere. She said, what time is it? And I go like this. And my shirt pulls back, and I'm wearing 2 watches. And we just stopped and said, well, that says it, doesn't it? That really says it.
I don't want to ask the question, who's your favorite person to work with? Because that's like the same as asking, I think it was Barry Corbin had told me, like, that's like asking which kid is my favorite. Some are uglier, but you love them all. But overall, like, was there one character you wished you had more scenes with in Dawson, or that they were able to kind of play up that, I guess, the character relationships more?
I think your suggestion was fascinating, because it's a loaded relationship. I have a very close relationship with my son Dawson on the show, and here's this kid who is hurting because there's a hole in his life, a dad-sized hole in his life, because he does not have a good relationship with his father. And that Mitch could come from a relatively stable, if the Leerys could be called stable, family situation, and try to, contribute to his life in a way. And maybe, that was, so I think that would be interesting. But I have to say, I had so much meaningful stuff to do in a supporting role. So there isn't a real character that I'm that I look back and say, gee, I wish I had more scenes with them, because I just thought that family unit was so great, you know. And then I got to branch out to the extent that I did in a couple of the episodes with the other characters, you know, that no, I feel good. I feel it's in a good place. My Dawson's Creek experience is in a good place. It's not really lacking anything.
My last question.
Yes.
Reunion.
Yes.
I mean, I guess this is like one of those questions like you might not ever be able to say no to, but I know Mary Margaret mentioned it. Kira mentioned, you know, he was working on something. Nina had a whole idea of where her character would be, and just being, you know, where Dawson's Creek sits in the pulp culture world and just how many fans still are behind it and love it. Is a reunion something like an actual scripted TV episode, or, you know, Mary Margaret talked about like a Hulu, Netflix kind of series, you know, like 8-episode series. Would that be something that you would hope that to be able to be back and be a part of, however they could work that in? I mean, is that something, or is it best to kind of leave that and more move forward?
Intellectually, I can come up with a lot of reasons why it would be problematic. I mean, how do you do Dawson's Creek in the day of social media? How do you do? But these people obviously would be older. An inventive, creative way. You know, I've just had such a wonderful experience coming back to a franchise after 24 years that if somebody came up with an idea that included me, because I'm dead, you know, I mean, either to come back in like 6 feet under, like my visitations, it's certainly something I would look at very carefully. And again, I just can't tell you how grateful I am that there's still the kind of interest, and it is a credit to the creators, to the writers, to Kevin, to Greg Berlanti, who took over as, you know, who I'm working with now in the Arrowverse.
Oh yeah, Greg, when he moved, I think I want to say it was after Dawson's, he did Everwood, which was a whole nother show that was just amazing, the world he built and put together. And that Greg, I envy you for being able to work with him on so many projects.
He's awesome, and also so collaborative and supportive, and just such a decent, good guy. He's just somebody you want to be around. But anyway, it's a real credit to all these people, and I think to the characters that were written and to the people who played them. Standing outside of myself and just let's talk about everyone else, that the people still hook into this series in such a personal way. And that's always gratifying, because you don't know when you're doing it. You don't know. You're doing the best you can. You're trying to, you know, it's a collaboration, you know, but that whatever it is now, 20 some years later, you know, that people are still so invested, and so many people want to see in some form these people come back together again in some form. I'm beyond grateful for that, and that's really moving for me.
Where can people follow you out on social media to be able to kind of keep up on what's going on, where your new projects are, and just you?
If people want purely entertainment stuff and purely my career, my personal appearances, my TV appearances, Instagram is where I have the most followers, because I do a minimum of, shall we say, political and social engagement in the political arena there. And sometimes people just need a place where they can go just to relax. I'm certainly very vocal about my political, social, religious views on Twitter. Some people find that really annoying. And I say, go follow me on Instagram. It all depends on what you're looking for. If you want to get to know John, the person, Facebook is a good balance. But I would say if it's mainly, you know, if you're one of the, if you're a just shut up and act person, certainly follow me on Instagram.
It's funny, like, because you hear that with like athletes or anything. No, just do this. Like, well,
yeah,
they still have an opinion on life, just like you do on the same topic. Like,
and it's important to know that my opinion is no more important than anyone else's. The fact that I'm on TV does not invest me with it. You know, all I'm doing is seeking truth the same way every other truth seeker out there is. No more important, no less important, you know. And I don't think that it is just because I may have a certain number of followers on Instagram or whatever. It's just me. It's like I say at Facebook, spoiler alert. Come here to find out who I am and what I care about. And then I think I even have a emoji, you know, like, oh my God, get ready. Yeah.
John, thank you for taking this time, man. I truly appreciate it.
Thanks, man. It's been a delight.
You have a great day.
You too, buddy. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Show with Hollywood JDT and Stuntman Kirk. Want to stay in the know on all things sports, wrestling, movies, and TV? Follow the show on social media at The Show Podcast. If you like today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on The Show.